Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all had a very nice lunch. So I would like to welcome you to this next session on the agenda today, which is a panel debate. It's more policy oriented, so I think already today we had a lot of very interesting, insightful presentations of our own work, an amazing keynote by Chris as well. But of course now in this policy panel, we want to go more into practice. So we really want to understand what does it mean, all these challenges that we have identified, the diagnosis that we made, as Vasil also nicely put it, we know some of the barriers to learning, to skills that we are confronted with, also in the context, of course, of the digital and the green transition and the current labor market shortages. But now, how do we move forward? I think those are some of the key questions that we should be trying to answer now in this panel discussion. My name is Caroline. I'm very honored to be able to moderate this session, and I've collaborated with the colleagues in the iSkill project. But I'm also really excited to introduce to you our amazing panelists who kindly agreed to participate. We were supposed to have one more panelist from Business Europe. Unfortunately, this person had to cancel for medical reasons. So unfortunately, he couldn't join us today, but nevertheless, I think we are very lucky to have you here. So besides me, there is, let me just scroll down to get your names right, Julia Fionda, Deputy Head of Unit for the Skills Agenda at DG Employment. Then at the end, we have Patricia Velicu, Head of Collective Bargaining and Social Policy Coordination at Industrial Europe. Besides her, we have Antonius Johannes Schröder, Research Associate and member of the Management Board at the Social Research Center at the University of Dortmund Technical University. And then we have Maud Saquet, Senior Public Policy and Economic Graph Manager at LinkedIn. So a very, I think, an excellent panel for our discussion today. Some of the points that I noted down from the meetings and the presentations that we had so far, which I think we should also touch on in this debate, is it was mentioned, for example, that adult education policy is really important, but we should also, of course, embed adult learning and education in industrial policy and economic policy. So we should look a bit beyond just this adult education program, and I think that's important to touch upon. A second point that was made are the different levels. So we spoke about the regional level, we spoke about sectors, which I also think we should come back down to and really reflect on a bit more. Also the Belgian case that my colleague presented there, it's very clear that at national level actually not much is happening, and it's really going down in the sectors and the regions. I think another important topic that I really wanted to hear your views on was mentioned in the presentations for Bulgaria and Slovakia, this idea of the quality of work as part of the discussion on skills and labor shortages. Learning culture, motivation, also a very important point made by the colleagues just entering the discussion again, really motivating workers to actually do learning, to go for training, and especially among certain groups of workers, so the lower educated, perhaps blue-collar workers, but also, and this we must not forget, that for certain groups of companies there are more challenges. So it was touched upon also this morning. Smaller companies, for example, in comparison to bigger companies, they are faced with different challenges and barriers. Some of these issues, I think, are well documented, well understood. That came also up in some of the Q&A that we had this morning. Okay, we know this, but then how do we move forward? And I think that's a question that I would really like all of you to address today. So maybe we can start with Julie on my side. I think we are very lucky to have finished this iSkill project really at the European Year of Skills. The timing could not have been better. And I think it also demonstrates just how important the topic really is. And it's also really put forward by the European Commission and the European level. So maybe as a first question, how can the European Commission's skills agenda adapt and evolve to really deal with all these challenges that we see today? So please. In terms of the organization, so we'll just give every one of the panelists 5 to 7 minutes for some first reflections, and then I will open to the audience. So if you have any questions, comments, please don't hesitate to jump in.
Okay, thanks, and thanks very much for asking the Commission to join you here today, and for the hard work that you've been doing also that feeds into the debate. So as you say, my name is Julie Fionda. I'm the Deputy Head of Unit in the unit which is responsible for the skills agenda in the European Commission, and that's also the unit that's responsible for coordinating the European Year of Skills primarily. And actually, a lot of my time is spent on the question you raised, I suppose, in terms of it's where is skills in the other files? You know, if there is if there is a defense strategy, it's key. There has to be a skills element. If there is a strategy on disability, it's clear there has to be a skills element. And I think one thing that the year has done in particular also has put that to another level. It's much more prominent on the discussion. So it's that horizontal part. So that said, on the challenges which you asked me about, I suppose three challenges, and you know them well. You can probably recite them better than I can. First, climate. Climate is very much driving public and private policy. I think there, when you ask Europeans what is one of their key concerns, economy always ranks first, more or less, but climate is very high up there. And so I think the changes that are being brought about bring both threats and opportunities as well. And we have to be able to be in a position to seize those opportunities. And that, a lot of the time, that comes down to skills. You can't deliver on Fit for 55. You can't deliver on the Green Deal Industrial Plan if you don't have people with the right skills to do that. Second transition, I suppose, is one of digital. It's not new, but of course it's an accelerated transition. Yes, we have a need for digital professionals in the EU, and there are significant gaps there, but that's probably not the biggest problem we have. I would say the biggest problem is one that all jobs, like all jobs are being greened, all jobs are having an increasingly digital component. We risk leaving a section of our population behind because, as we set out in Upskilling Pathways initiative, digital skills are the third basic skill. Yet in Europe, we still have a big problem with many people having very poor basic digital skills. That means they're more precarious in the labor market, it's difficult to find jobs or to progress in work, and also from a perspective of social justice and engagement in society more broadly, it's also a big issue. Last transition that I wanted to mention is one of demographics. So Europe is an aging continent. This week, the Commission published the Demography Toolbox, setting out actions and activities ongoing that can support member states on this question. And I think there was a Eurobarometer published in the same time, which says that 7 in 10 Europeans agree that demographic trends put at risk the EU's long-term economic prosperity and competitiveness. And the most pressing demographic challenges are considered to be population aging at 42%, shrinking of the working age population, and labor shortages, 40%. And I think when we talk about labor shortages, we need to talk about both the skills dimension, so skill shortages, but also the quality of work, and I think we will come back to that. And with a low birth rate overall in Europe, I think the question we have to come back to is one of migration. As well as making the best use possible of all of the talent that we have within Europe, enabling refugees and asylum seekers to put their skills to use and to integrate into our societies where they can do so, But also we need to look at the question of attracting people with the skills that we need from third countries. And there next month, we should put on the table a package specifically on these questions, looking at attracting third country talent to Europe. So I think that's perhaps one to watch out for. So what else did I want to say here? Maybe just the last challenge is one of inertia, or one of thinking somebody else will do it mentality. And we all agree on the need, but it's not enough to agree on the need. We need to actually take action on it. And because it's a shared problem, it's a shared responsibility to take action on it. So I think it's not because Brussels says that something is important and puts in place some frameworks that it actually happens. What happens, as you said, happens at the local and the regional level or in sectors. So I think it's about communities, workplaces, and individuals themselves of seeing the benefit of investing in training. I think, what we've done in terms of the skills agenda, in terms of the adult learning target, so 60% of the workforce by 2030, can set the frame. The funding that we have at the EU level, if you look at the ESF Plus and the Recovery and Resilience Facility, together they're 65 billion euros alone. So it's quite a lot of investment in human capital and human resources. But maybe to end on the question of why education and training is needed, and I think we need to convince people first. Motivation is a key question, and we need to convince people that it's worth their while, that there will be a benefit to doing this. For businesses also, we need to convince businesses that they should look more at training. Already they're doing a lot, but we need to convince them that they need to do more, and also with certain target groups. And there, I think it's probably not right that the value of an enterprise should be judged more on its physical capital than on its human capital, especially in knowledge-driven, service-based economies, which are largely a feature of Europe. If you buy a machine or a robot, it's considered an asset. If you invest in training, it's a cost. So I will probably leave it on that point.
Thank you. I thought that was already quite thought-provoking. So now I would like to go to Patricia. I think today we already discussed a lot on the role that trade unions can and are playing in this whole skills provision, motivating people as well. So I would like to hear your thoughts on the challenges that we see today, but also what trade unions can and are doing, and perhaps where there are some gaps still.
Thank you very much for this invitation and this very timely event. Maybe for those of you who don't know Industrial Europe, we are the European Federation representing... It's not on? Oh, sorry.
No, it's on.
Do I have to... Is it okay now? Yes. So thank you. Industrial Europe is the European Federation representing workers in the manufacturing, mining and energy sector across Europe. We have over 7 million members from over 40 countries. So, and actually this question of challenges is really fundamental for us, because really in our sectors, as the panelists from the European Commission also mentioned, we are really seeing the impacts of the twin transition really transforming the content of jobs, the nature of jobs, and it's happening very, very rapidly. It's unprecedented, to be honest. Just to mention some numbers, because when we actually look at the numbers, it's even more astonishing, the urgency that we are facing. So in our sectors, manufacturing, mining and energy, we are speaking about over 25 million workers, that will have to be reskilled and upskilled in the next decade. If we look at the battery sector alone, to reach the ambition of the Commission, we are speaking about 800,000 workers. If we look at the automotive sector, one of the key sectors in Europe, there we are speaking about 2.4 million workers that would need to be reskilled and upskilled, and this very, very fast. So indeed, the challenges are massive, and adult learning is definitely part of the solution. And when we say adult learning, we are actually thinking a lot about on-the-job training. And because it's the European Year of Skills, which we think is a very good initiative for the Commission, we think that we need to have a very concrete outcome out of these years. And we cannot just discuss about skills if we don't speak about training, if we don't speak about job quality. And that's why we would really like to have a concrete outcome of the European Year of Skills in the form of a right to training. And when we say right to training, we really mean on-the-job training. So not necessarily only education, because every time we say this, we always hear, oh, but the European Union doesn't have competence to do this. Well, it depends how you look at it, because if we speak about on-the-job training, a right to training is actually part of what it means to have good working conditions. If we are looking at this context where the twin transition, especially the digital transition, is really requiring workers in many sectors to really update their skills to work differently, it's an immense stress on them. You cannot have good working conditions if you don't have access to this right to training and to really be able then to do your work in safe conditions. So to us, it's definitely part of Article 153 of the treaty, good working conditions, and that therefore we do see it as the European Union having competence to deliver on this. So this would be one very clear demand and solution that we would see to really tackle this challenge and to make adult learning a reality. And then, of course, you mentioned social dialogue. Social dialogue at all levels is definitely part of the solution, because it's not enough to have a right. You also need then to translate this right at the national level, at the sectoral level, at the company level, and that's where the social partners really become key, because they are the ones who know the reality in their sectors, in their companies the best. They are the ones who know which workers need to be reskilled, which workers need to be upskilled, who is going into early retirement, what job profiles do we need. And that's why they should really be involved in the skill forecasts, in the skills mapping, in the development of the training pathways, the training curricula. And this is not just utopia, it's really happening in some countries. If we look at the Nordic countries, in Denmark, the social partners are really involved from the curricula development to really making training a reality in companies. But then we have Sweden, where two landmark agreements were recently translated into a law, and that law provides the necessary finance for workers to really go into shorter and longer training programs on the jobs or between jobs. And this is what we need to really meet the challenges of the just transition, of the twin transition, not just the green transition, to have a just transition. So yeah, we think that these two elements are also solutions to the massive challenges that we see. And I just want to say one small addition when it comes to migration and to the labor shortages, and this is also related to the job quality. Well, we have to keep in mind the effect of brain drain on regions. A recent study from Eurofound actually showed that similar profiles are missing across countries. So migration can only be a short-term solution it's not a sustainable solution to the so-called labor shortages. We need to invest in quality jobs everywhere. We need to make sure that we have the necessary amount of apprenticeships. If we take Germany, for example, there have been massive cuts in apprenticeships at the start of COVID that have never been replaced, and now employers are crying over labor shortages. Well, I think we need to be a bit more, we need to have a more holistic approach when it comes to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of interesting points, and I can already feel the discussion starting. So perhaps I hand over now to you, Antonius. You also know the German case very well, so you may want to pick up on the last comment. But I also know, and from your earlier intervention, you understand very well the ecosystems that need to be built around companies, around workers to really make it work, to move forward and to get some training. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Maybe I should start with some information to show you that I might have industry bias about my interventions. I'm coordinating the European Steel Skills Alliance and the European Skills Alliance for Industrial Symbiosis. These are two sectoral blueprints in the Erasmus Plus program. About more than 25 sectoral blueprints are existing, so it's a sectoral approach. And since 1 month, I'm coordinating the large-scale partnership energy-intensive industries under the Pact for Skills, where automotive and Jakub, we work very close together, are very engaged in. So having said this, it's, let's say, the most important challenge from the industry perspective is to have in-time solutions, short-term solutions, and because, for instance, in the steel industry, we realized that every job profile in every production unit has the demand of new digital skills, for instance, but also, and that's digital skills are very much combined with transversal skills. We heard in the morning about team player skills and other things. So that's very important. But as Patricia already mentioned, it's very much combined with the solutions. Let's say it like this, not short-term solutions, but let's say methodological solutions. So important start for the things we did is that we really underline that the twin transition is only possible with the workers. So it's not a technological challenge. It's also to develop effective and usable technologies for the workplace and to integrate the worker experience. And therefore, you mentioned it, the ecosystem approach in the blueprints, but also in the Pact for Skills. We have this ecosystem approach by integrating the companies, the sector associations, the social partners, training providers, research institutions, but also regional institutions, and sometimes, not to forget, civil society organizations. So there are a lot of, let's say, social innovations in education at the regional, local level, which is not used, and where the companies also and the industry could also take advantage of. So it has to be a joint venture of the ecosystem. I forgot policy, sorry. They have to be on board as well. And for me, it is a continuous process. Therefore, the sectoral blueprints I coordinated, we started with a sustainability perspective in the beginning, how to run the Skills Alliance after the project funding. So it has to be a continuous job to adjust the skills demands of the workers in time, in short term. But I think I stop now. I have a lot of other messages. I hope I can place them later.
I'm sure you will. Thank you so much. And then perhaps we can go to our final panelist, Maud. So from the perspective of LinkedIn or perhaps private companies more general, can you share some of your insights into skills and competences, what is needed the most, and perhaps also some ideas on how we can make sure that people are trained and their skills are up to date? Thank you.
Of course, and thank you very much for the invitation. Maybe I'll start with a very quick step back to explain perhaps a bit why we're even here and trying to, I think, share some insights in those conversations. I think most of you may know that LinkedIn is an online platform that connects professionals worldwide. We have over 900 million professionals globally currently as members on the platform. And we are part of the ecosystem that helps people find jobs and build the skills and relationships that they may need to further their career, helping as well employers and recruiters to reach out to people and potential candidates on the platform. What we call internally economic growth, and that you may see on my title, and that often generates a lot of questions as to what does it mean, is the kind of digital map or representation of the global labor market that we can kind of create or generate through the data that we have on the platform. That's the name we give it internally. And through those data, we can generate some insights and some identify some trends in the labor market, and we try to share those insights that are usually very unique and often near real-time evolution as to what's happening on the labor market. So that's a bit where we intervene and where we try to share some insights. I think just to react very quickly to the conversation, we see a couple of challenges as well. I think probably more from a private company position and also from a company that is involved in recruiting services and solutions for employers. One, I think, has been mentioned here many times before, obviously, is the fact that skills keep changing and seems faster and faster every year. With all of the I would say, discussion and public debate around AI coming and trying, will change the entire market over the past year. We conducted some research over the summer to try and see, what we can see, and I'm happy to go into a bit more detail there. But basically, we estimate, as of this summer, that the skill required for jobs might change by 2030 by at least 65% due to AI. That's obviously we're at the beginning of that change, so we'll need to refine, I think, that number further. But I think it also highlights the fact that it's perhaps one of the rare time where the impact on the update of skills that you need to do will certainly touch, I think, a lot of the manufacturing sector, energy sector, but also maybe more of the white-collar sector that we were thinking of traditionally, and that's certainly one main challenge. And the maybe second big challenge that we are facing very much as perhaps more as a provider of recruiting solution is the fact that we all know that the labor market is generally opaque, inefficient, often unequal, and that so that there is a lot, so that's, I would say, has always been the truth about the labor market, but there are some trends that are making that even harder these days. You mentioned declining population is certainly one, the technological changes as well, obviously, and as we were mentioning, the, I would say, desire and request of a workforce regarding the types of job, the quality, etc. So that makes it even harder, I would say, to find the good candidate and the matches that we're trying to represent there. And so one of the way, again, from our perspective, that we are trying to address that and that we recommend as an approach to take is very much the skills-based approach to learning. Sorry, to learning, well, yes, but to hiring mostly as one of the ways to try to address the labor shortages we see today, but also the fact that the jobs will change. We probably won't have a degree already organized or set up university to train people to enter into these new jobs, and that we need to be able to identify the skills needed there and the best candidate that we can find there. So in the research, we have a website, it's linkedin.economic graph, where you can find all of our research. It's public with all the methodologies and the data set that we use. And the research we published over last spring was showing that on average for the EU, if you take that approach of trying to really look at the skills when you're recruiting rather than only about the degree that the candidate may have or only the previous job that the candidate may have, then you're growing your talent pool by an average 6%. Sorry, 6 times, across the EU. You have differences across member states, obviously. That would be around 11 times for Spain, if I'm not wrong, and only 3 times for Luxembourg. That shows that at a time where we already have labor shortages, that if we try to think a bit differently about recruiting, it might at least be one way to help us try to bridge those gaps. I can stop there, but I think just to come back very quickly on one of your points in a question as to types of skills or competence that we're looking at for as business. So as I said, it's actually very difficult to even answer that question because of the rate of changes of our job, even for us, when looking at our own employees and who to hire. In the research we published over the summer on AI, we could already see 2 things. One, where our data scientists have identified around 500 skills that could already be impacted by AI and generative AI, who's being, writing, translation, financial reporting, email marketing, even software development tools. So a lot of skills that I think are used almost every day by a lot of the workforce. But we could also see that the number of AI skills were suddenly increasing a lot in the profiles of our members, most of them linked to generative AI, actually. And Europe was not lagging behind. We had, Finland and Ireland were in the top 5 globally of member states where those AI skills were, I would say, increasing the most across all of our profiles. So just an example as to how it's hard for us to think about this. And so flexibility, I would say, for employee, trying to just be aware that you won't have the same job all of your life and that you will have to continue lifelong learning is perhaps what we're looking at right now, because we don't know what the job of our employee may look like in 5 years or 6 years.
Thank you all so much. Before I open to the audience, I had one question that maybe I can ask all of you. I think one of the red threads in the project and also in all of the discussions today is this lack of a learning culture, both on the company side but also on the worker side. So on the worker side, we spoke about people not being motivated, having poor previous learning experiences, and so on. Also on the company side, I think there is a consensus that it's important and the business case can sometimes be clear, but still not all companies offer training or offer as much training as they should. We heard some barriers mentioned also by colleagues from Bulgaria and Slovakia, for example. If I think about the Belgian case, the fact that we have these 3 training incentives, but nobody knows them and nobody uses them. We have a very elaborate ecosystem, but then maybe the roles are not so clear. The support is not always there where it's supposed to be. So how do we move forward? How can we, in such a context, really improve the learning culture among companies and among workers? I don't know who would like to start. Please.
Maybe from my experience, let's say it's not a big challenge for the big companies in the energy-intensive industries, but there are also sectors like ceramics, which are more small and medium-sized. And I think the approach given by the open coordination of the European Union, the European Commission, is very, very helpful. So we need a European, let's say, coordination which gives incentives to the national and regional level, but the regional, especially the regional local level, is very important. Not to to give the responsibility only to the companies or only to the workers, etc. This has to be done in what we call a common training ecosystem, regional and national training ecosystem. And if you do it in this way, then it helps a lot to push things forward. Just one very recent example is the use of hydrogen in the steel industry, not only in the steel industry, but in the energy-intensive industries. So in a workshop, in a regional workshop in our Rhine-Ruhr area, it became clear that the companies need this qualification not only for the managers, but also for the workers, or especially for the workers, because it changes the workplace a lot. So they decided they thought about, yes, okay, we can wait until our public authorities, national authorities change the curricula. That takes usually about 3 to 4 years, but it's too late. And then they developed in a concerted action additional qualification for hydrogen with the chambers of commerce, a steel company, employment agency, training providers, and integrating vocational schools. So, and with this, they did it in 6 months, and it was certified first only in the region, but then put on the national level via the National Chamber of Commerce Association, and now in Germany everyone could get this certification. So this is an example how to change the learning culture in a way that it is not only the responsibility of single organizations. It has to be a common challenge, and it has to be commonly solved from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of following on, I suppose. I think I entirely agree with this. You know, it's not one actor, it's all of us working together. But maybe just to kind of look at the individual also motivation, which in the impact assessment for our proposal on the individual learning accounts, motivation came out as the most important barrier. There were other significant barriers, cost, etc., but motivation was the most important barrier. And that also goes to what I said earlier about, you know, so what's in it for me? Why should I train? You know, what's the benefit of doing so? Is it going to get me a better job? Is it going to get me a higher salary? Is it going to open doors to me? And I think we have to have those conversations about it, you know, because people will take rational decisions, you know, if they're busy, let's say they're working, if they're busy with a full day at work, or they're managing care for children or elderly relatives, they're managing a whole series of things. They're trying to pay their rent or their mortgage. So there are a lot of competing things. And why train? I think in that sense as well, we have to think about how do you motivate in particular. And when we talk about, I mean, the ILA essentially is kind of an operationalization of this right to training. And I think importantly here, our proposal and the adopted text really focuses on the universality of it. So people in work, people not in work, people in other situations. And there we have to put in place mechanisms. We have to encourage actors to reach out to people who are not getting the training for one reason or other. The training tends to flow to the people who already have the training, basically, which is all very well and good, and they need to upskill and continually update their skills. But we need to make sure that the other people don't fall off the bottom. And I think it's when also we talk about what are the right skills, I think those skills will be very different depending upon where you're coming from and what's an employable skill to someone who is, hasn't been in the labour market or hasn't been in work for the last 20 years might be a very different thing to somebody who's been working. And maybe just to finish on the research that we've done, and our agencies, CEDEFOP and Eurofund have done, in that the most demanded skills for employers, and I think we don't need to get frightened here in terms of, yes, the pace of change is quick, but actually, what do people ask for most? It's adaptability. It's problem solving. It's team working. And that cuts across all levels. And I think we also need to better value those skills and better promote those skills.
Thank you. Patricia, I saw you nodding, especially when we were talking about the quality of jobs and how important it is. And then I hand over to you, please.
Yes, thank you. I actually agree a lot with what has been said before, because indeed we also recognize that motivation is one of the main challenges of overtackling the skills challenges and the training aspect. But that's why I think we are insisting on this right to training, because very often people don't have the time to go into training. And when we're speaking about the right to training, we obviously mean training during working hours. And actually you have in many countries examples of company collective agreements or sectoral agreements where it's very clearly stipulated how much time per year you have during your working time to go into training for specific reasons. Now the problem is, and indeed it's what has been said, actually most of the training that is being done, even at the level of the blue-collar workers, is this obligatory health and safety training per year. So it's obviously not skills development and what we would like to be seen, but it does show that when a training right / duty is in place during working time, it does help and it does motivate more or less people to go into training. So it's essential to offer the time. This would be also interesting to explore in the context of working time reduction in view of the twin transition, but I think that's a different topic. But the second aspect that is also related to a right to training is that a worker, it would be clear for him or her what are the actual skills that they are gaining and what is the direct compensation for that. And this is exactly what the colleague from the Commission has been saying. Very often it's unclear to workers why they should go into training. Will there be a pay raise? What's in for them? And this is very often also stipulated then in collective agreements, where it's very clear that if you undergo training, you will automatically have something out of it. And maybe to mention a concrete instrument that we really promote as trade unions to motivate workers into going into training, it's this annual development interviews. And it's really important to distinguish them from assessment interviews. So it should be very clear that workers eventual raise does not depend on what they say in this interview, but it should really be a conversation to explain to them the need to go into training, the conditions, and again, the compensation for it. So this is something that we really think should be replicated, and something that used to exist in the UK. We used to have this learning trade union reps. And that was a great example. You had people from the union that workers trusted, explaining to them why they should go into training, motivating them. But I understood that this unfortunately is not really existing that much anymore. And we think that this type of good examples that maybe disappeared should be looked at again and should be replicated across Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think the point that you made also about the quality of the training, it really shine through. What are the actual skills that somebody is getting? How can they be applied also to other contexts? So thank you for that point. Matt?
Thank you. I think I agree with everything that's been said. I think your point in particular on problem solving problem-solving skill and trying to, I think, promote things better. Those types of things really, I think, resonated with me, because I think a lot of the things I've been hearing this past year with AI is coming to take our job, and oh, as a policy professional, well, look, AI is writing your position paper for you, so you know, so you know, or your email, or your emails. So like, sure, that's nice, but what am I doing with all of this free time suddenly? So a bit weird, but then you start hearing, like, I'm guessing you hear with every technological revolution that we need to focus on what makes us human, the human skills, you know, what machine won't be able to do for you, etc., etc. So certainly some truth there, and maybe the soft skills that we always talk about are something to really keep in mind, again, for, as always, but perhaps especially for the coming years. Regarding, I think, how to motivate workers and employees for upskilling, fully agree with the fact that it should be certainly during working hours, absolutely. But thinking also as a role as a company to indeed explain to the employee and a worker why this is needed, and how and what you can do as an employer to help there. I think it's really a question of perhaps a bit more personalization in those types of discussion. I think it seems often very perhaps abstract, and how does that, you know, relate to me exactly? And well, at LinkedIn we have a platform called LinkedIn Learning, but there are many different tools across obviously the market. But what the trend we've been seeing these past few years is trying to go towards a more personalization as to other types of training of skills that a person would like to aspire to, more dedicated conversation as to, okay, what do you want to do? What are my needs as an employer? What are the skills you're missing? What are the specific training for you that, you know, may ensure that you get those skills and potentially that position? So that's at least a trend we see positively, and that we are trying to address. And just to conclude, we see, at least already on our platform, an understanding that the skills are more and more important, and that is something that you need to develop and put forward. We see that over the past years, our members on the platform added 380 million skills to their profiles globally. So we see an increase, I think, in the realization that there is a value there from a lot of employees and workers. And in the last year as well, more than 45% of the recruiters we have on the platform have explicitly used skills data to fill their roles. And that's an increase of 12% year over year. So it's starting. It's not there yet, but it's certainly starting.
Thank you. Now I would like to ask you all in the audience if you have any questions or comments to what was said in the panel.
Thank you very much. I'll sit, if you don't mind, because I have a comment that will hopefully lead to some questions as well. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this really timely debate and for all your interventions. My name is David, and I represent Generation.org, which is the largest employment nonprofit in the world that probably most of you have never heard of. And that's for different reasons, but the main one is because for many of our first years of existence, which is the first 5 years of our existence, we were part of McKinsey & Company, and they sort of kept us as a McKinsey social initiative. Now, since we're an independent nonprofit and I'm based in Brussels and represent the organization here, I would like to raise 3 points that come to almost like as a segue to what Julie really rightfully set the scene of, which is the 3 challenges we see in our work of reskilling and placing vulnerable people into jobs. The green opportunity, the digital skills that are lacking, and finally the aging population. I will make some micro comments, meaning that you've really set the scene perfectly on these trends, whilst with our work we see some challenges that maybe we can respond together here as a group. When it comes to green economy and green opportunity, the problem I see, and we see in our work, is the fact that most of the jobs that are out there in this green economy are jobs that are very hands-on, in some cases, as they say, dirty jobs, and it's very hard for us in our work to reskill people, to attract young people, young candidates for these jobs, and also women. So without young people and women, how can we fulfill the climate goals, since the green economy jobs attract mostly men in their 40s, 50s, and so on. So that's one question. On the digital skill element, we recently launched a report called the Launching a Tech Hiring Revolution, where we've seen most employers, and not tech employers, most companies ask their candidates to have digital skills, but their requirements are increasing faster than they can actually reskill themselves. And I'm speaking about especially programming languages and so on. And the same companies are not yet, as I think some of you mentioned, implementing skills-based hiring. And I'm trying to understand how can we bridge this gap of technology is advancing, requirements are increasing, but people are human. We cannot learn as fast as machines. And finally, and I'll stop, mid-career opportunity, that's how we call it, because we think people above the age of 45 are a huge, huge asset for the economy. The problem that we've seen in the people we try to help is that they're faced with incredible barriers to employment. Ageism being the main one. And I rarely see ageism being addressed, but unfortunately, if you're mid-career or older, you have, besides all the challenges you have of moving job maybe after 20 years, you're also perceived by employers wrongfully as not as able to learn a new skill, to be digitally savvy. And that's a huge barrier that we see with the people we try to help in this mid-career element. And finally is this element of training. What can you do? We work with vulnerable people. What works for us, we make no excuse for them not to join, meaning we make it free. We provide subsidies for childcare and transport in case they cannot afford those. And very importantly, we have a job, or at least a job interview at the end. Because when you have somebody who, as I think Patricia rightly said, training for training's sake, it's for people who are here in the room. We have the opportunity to take maybe a course online. For most people, for vulnerable people in particular, taking time off work or taking time from unemployment benefits is just a privilege. So training connected to employment is, I think, what we strongly believe in. And apologies for taking so much time, but thank you.
Thank you so much. Who would like to respond to it?
Maybe I could start. First, thank you for raising the topic of image and recruitment, and I would include also retainment. That's for the energy-intensive industries. That's a really big challenge. So, and that's also a thing why they focus very much on the twin transition, getting to a new narrative that these industries are not the problem anymore, but to think it around. They are the solution. They could solve the environmental challenges much more than today, and I think they are aware of it. So I think that's very, very important. And this includes also the integration of other target groups within their perspective. So it's for instance, one steel company, the first time in their existence, they couldn't get as much apprentices as they want. The first time. They said the quantity is not given and the quality is also not given. So these are also very important aspects. And concerning the speed of skills adjustment, what we focused on in our skills strategy is an incremental upskilling on the job, supported also by online training, which could be integrated in the learning management systems of the companies, and that seems to work very good. And the training platform we have, the Steel Hub and the Skills for Planet Hub, they are open platforms where the companies and the training providers integrate their training, and everyone is free to choose it. Some are with a fee, some are European funded, and it's for free, and so on. But this is the way we choose.
Yeah, I wanted to react as well. Thank you very much for, I think your comments make a lot of sense in this context. And actually, I'm going to react especially to the green jobs not being attractive, and also the old industry, which we also think it's part of the solution, obviously. Well, part of the problem is the quality of the job, and that will also reply to why it's the first time that they couldn't find enough steel apprentices. where I understood from the colleagues from IG Metal that the problem is the pay of the apprentices. If you have to choose yourself, you're young, will you do an apprenticeship in the steel sector where you work in 3 shifts in quite hard conditions, let's face it, it's steel, or you do an apprenticeship to become an office clerk and you are paid the same, what would you choose? Well, so we do think that job quality really has to be addressed, and especially when it comes to all these new green jobs. Battery, everybody loves to talk about batteries, it's going to save us, right? Well, if we look at the situation of the job quality in the battery sectors, let's take Hungary. They're now becoming one of the big countries. They have, I think, 6 or 7 companies opening in the countries. Well, it turns out, that's what our colleagues told us, that most of the workers who are being employed there are third country migrants who are employed on really very precarious contracts. The trade unions are not allowed to go in the company. This is absolutely outrageous. It's obvious that these jobs are unattractive if the salaries cannot allow for decent living. I definitely agree with also what you've said with the mid-career opportunities. It's completely unacceptable that it's impossible to find a job when you're in your 40s. This is something that we are seeing as well, and it should be part of the strategy to overcome this problem of the so-called labor shortages. We are quite frustrated to read so much about these labor shortages when we are in a situation where we still have a very high youth unemployment level in Europe. It's double than the average unemployment, and actually we are speaking about the most educated generation, the generation with the biggest digital skills. How is it possible that they don't find employment? Well, maybe because nobody's offering them open-ended contracts or contracts that actually allow them to pay their rent. So we really have to look at this job quality aspect. Actually, a recent study by the European Trade Union Institute showed that all sectors that have a problem in recruitment and that are facing labor shortages are paying 9% on average less than the sectors who don't. So it's definitely the main problem.
Direction, or otherwise you take another question. There were plenty of questions, so.
Thanks, Caroline. Thank you. Thank you very much. Really interesting discussion. I'm going to ask a simple question, but there's, as usual, as an academic, there's a preamble to it. And so I've been involved in skills and developing skills policy with the UK government, Scottish government, for 30 years. And what I see is the same set of problems about competitiveness, and we throw another skills policy at it. And I've been around long enough to know that some of the same skills policies are coming around 2 or 3 times. So is it enough just to focus on skills? Skills obviously deliver some good things, but they're not part of the whole story. And my question is whether or not it's time for DG employment to start looking inside firms and looking at how firms are managed and organized. And I say that because we know when it comes to the kind of management, and there are some good firms and good management practices across Europe, and if you could identify them and try and extend them out across Europe, that would be good. So instead of just having a skills policy, maybe we ought to have at DG Employment a management policy. And as part of that, I'll just give an example, just picking up on Patricia's point there about job quality. We talked about shrinking workforces and older workers, an older population, but not drawing them in. One of the things we find in our age, certainly, when people get to 50, particularly women, they drop out of the labour market, either because they're suffering from mental health problems, or menopause is something which we don't often talk about because work isn't organised around that. And in many respects, we kind of push them to go out the workforce, and we say, wouldn't it be good if we could get them back in the workforce or to keep all the workers staying longer in? But the problem is if they're out because they've got mental health problems or they've economically inactive, as we call it, very euphemistically, why would we want them to come back into the same jobs and have the same problems again? And so maybe we need to think about how we configure the management process. And one of the things which comes across very clear in the evidence is that voice and participation for workers reduces mental health problems and increases productivity. And I'm always puzzled where, I mean, I can understand it from the UK government's point of view, why they don't want to go inside firms, but DG employment's a bit more progressive, I think, than the UK government. So maybe it's time for us to have a management policy as well.
Okay, it was specifically directed at me, although maybe kind of our social partner colleagues can respond. Yeah, I think going down to the level of the firms, I think you've heard about the Pact for Skills. You've heard about the partnership approach to, and also looking at best practice, what works, what doesn't. We've heard also about the quality of work. We've heard about the importance of social dialogue and how, let's say, the last college, the last commission, and this commission, the current College of Commissioners that have pursued on that, the importance of active and effective social dialogue in the process. I think that is very much at the level of enterprise, at the level of workplace, and encouraging the partners themselves, not us probably to put our boots specifically into, but really getting people. And I think the Commission has an important convening power, which often we kind of overlook or can be overlooked. But we should use this convening power to help to put the different actors together. I would also highlight a bit, going back to kind of the point I made in my first intervention, was this question of how skills and how quality work is valued. Now, if we think about things like the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, which sets the parameters for what companies, large companies, agreed, should be reporting on, and that includes social questions. It's a much strengthened chapter on social questions. And now the implementing acts in kind of the specific parlance are being worked up in order to how to take that forward in practical terms. And that very much is the management of companies. How companies are organized, how they manage, how they report in their management accounts and to their boards. I think as well, we are currently just starting a study on accountancy and accountancy standards and how to value investment in training as valuable to the enterprise in that sense. And I kind of alluded to it I mean, let's see what comes out, but it shouldn't be right in today's world that in a service-based economy, you are valuing more the company or incentivizing more the company to invest in robot than person or in capital infrastructure. So I think there are perhaps, I take your point, but I think we are already doing a lot on the frameworks that help to make that happen without going directly into the businesses themselves, let's say. I don't know if...
I can maybe say just a couple words. I think my co-panelists are certainly much well versed than I am in maybe in all of those matters to maybe answer your question. But I'm also aware that I work for a sector where we're perhaps a bit privileged in this way, in a sense that at LinkedIn, the main priority of the company, the priority number one of the CEO is talent, and ensuring that they recruit the right people, that they retain the right people, and that can make progress, and that it may not be the case, I think, everywhere. I just wanted to intervene just to flag that we pulled, I think, a lot of HR professionals on the platform recently, and they are expecting to be a bit in the front line as a strategic advisors to be able to try to manage some of the current situation, but what's also coming. And I think maybe sometimes a bit overlooked to just ensure that we try to empower those professionals to play a key role in a company, because I think the HR function is often seen, in different ways within different companies. And that's something we think that maybe could be done at least anything that could support them or empower them would certainly help at least.
Okay, further questions?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Sue Bird. I used to work for the European Commission until a couple of years ago. I'd like to invite the panel to comment a little bit more on migration, the topic of migration, if you would. Julie mentioned the importance of demographic change, and Patricia tended to underplay the potential influence of migration. You said that as far as training up a workforce, a European skilled workforce for the future, that you thought it was a temporary solution. I'm not entirely sure about that, but maybe I don't have all the knowledge necessary. I'd invite the panel to comment further on that.
Please, maybe Patricia first.
It's your turn.
I'm just going to react because I was mentioned. Yeah, no, sorry, I'm not trying to underplay the aspect of migration. I think our concern is just that if you look at how the debate has developed over the last year on the topic of shortages, the main solution that has been pushed very much to the front, to be very honest, by employers associations has been migration. Nobody mentioned job quality, and that's why we think that's just really a very easy fix, if you want, to the problem of shortages. We need to have a much more complex approach. There have been reports over the past year by the OECD, the IMF, the European Commission itself, Eurofund, CEDEFOP, all pointing to the fact that one of the main reasons for the shortages in all the sectors is the job quality. But nobody seems to speak about that, and we are just putting in place policies to facilitate migration, not to mention the huge discrepancy between how we treat talent and refugees, which I think is completely outrageous. So maybe we should also discuss about a different approach to migration that is a bit more human rights based. It's a different topic. So not trying to underplay, just to make the discussion a bit more balanced and to also look at all the causes and not just to the easy fixes. Migration is part of the solution, but it's not the only solution to the problem of shortages. And we have a position paper that I'm happy to share with everybody where we explain this approach. Thank you.
Maybe one sentence from my side. We also tried in our Polish regional rollout of this Steel Alliance to integrate migrants from Ukraine, because a lot of people went to Poland, and as Patricia already said, it's not so. We had the idea to integrate them because a lot of people in the Ukraine are also have knowledge about the steel sector, etc., to integrate them, but we couldn't find someone. For multiple reasons, most of the refugees are women, and they are not interested in this kind of job. And in the end, it's what Patricia said. It's a job quality and a bit also the stereotypes about the work in this industry. But mainly the job quality is, the companies have to be aware they won't get people if they don't change the quality of the jobs.
Maybe just very quickly. Yeah, absolutely. Job quality is an issue, and it has to be part of the conversation. And absolutely, we also need to think about the activation and the better enabling people who are not currently actively in work to move into work. And here I'm thinking particularly of young people not in employment, education and training, and I'm thinking of wwomen, who are the two largest, let's say, untapped or lower tapped groups and to do that, I think it goes back to some of the points that our colleague here made, in that you need to create the right environments that enable people to make those steps into the labour market and to manage work alongside other responsibilities as well. I think on the and we need to invest in people who are here, who are kind of domestic, let's say, Europeans, as our first responsibility. But we also have a responsibility when it comes to refugees, also under international law, to integrate and to help those people to integrate into our societies, and that includes into our labour markets. They bring with them skills. Overall, it does tend to be a lower skilled cohort than the average, let's say, but they can, and over the longer term, can make a positive contribution to the labour market and to society more broadly. But that said, even if you do all of that, there is still a need to bring people in. I think just looking at the kind of the figures, there have been more deaths than births in Europe every year since 2012. Now, you're not going to turn that around quickly. We're getting older. In 2020, there were around 3 working age people for every retired person. By 2050, unless something radical happens, the ratio will be 2 to 1. And even if we suddenly have a huge birth increase, we're still going to have a problem. So we also need to think about the role that migration can make, particularly in those shortage areas where the EU is struggling to fill posts. But that doesn't mean going back on our base of good. I mean, this is social Europe. This is a Europe which has safeguards in place, including legally provided safeguards. This is a Europe which should not be exploiting people. We should not be having a race towards the bottom in terms of. So I think it's not, in that sense, it's not one answer or another. It has to be all together. Sorry, Sue, that was a bit long-winded.
I think you have time for one more question. Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you so much. So hi, I'm Hannah. I work for EuroCities. And so we have talked a lot throughout this event about the necessity to create ecosystems and make sure that we support vulnerable groups, etc. But I don't think that cities have been mentioned a lot as a key enabler of that, even though they have direct access to these vulnerable groups and tend to be closer to them because they work with different NGOs, they work with different social services and all that. And I think that for that reason, it's important to make sure that they are a part of this conversation. So the first question that I would have is, how can we make sure that cities are more included in this process to make sure that we really enable a fair and just transition? So that would be my first question. The second one would be also something that cities have been saying a lot, is this question of reproducing inequalities. So we already have these pre-existing inequalities in the labor market that affect lower skilled workers. How do we make sure, once we've included them, if we manage to do that, into the green transition, how do we make sure that we do not replicate these inequalities against workers? And the last one is a question about funding. So cities have been also exploiting ESF Plus, notably a lot, to develop these programs for vulnerable groups. But something that they have been talking a lot about is the administrative hurdles that they face to implement it and take advantage of these resources. What other alternative fundings could cities, leverage to help them conduct these, to help them conduct the green transition more? Thank you, and thank you very much.
I can maybe just say a couple of things on the first couple of points, because on funding, I'm not sure I'm the best place to answer. But on the role of cities, I think certainly on our end. So as I mentioned, I think earlier, we're certainly proponent of or advocating for a skills-based approach to hiring. And we think that for that to hopefully be successful, in the long term, we need partnership between employers and I would say local authorities as well, as to discuss, okay, what do we need? What skills are we needed? How can we amend, the training that is given in your city or in your region, etc. there. So I think for us, it's at least those types of discussion and partnership that would certainly be very helpful going forward if we want to go to a more of a skills-based economy, maybe than what we currently are. And on the point, perhaps more broadly on equalities and ensuring we are as inclusive as possible in those transition. I was going back to the skills-first approach, because when we were doing our research, so those results are available on our website. We published that, I think, last May. So I mentioned that following that approach is increasing the talent pool that employers have access to. But we see that in some way, it also democratizes access to job, because if you're looking only at skills, or firstly at skill, a bit less at degrees, then you see that the talent pool increases even more for people that do not have, I would say, a first degree, or also for women, or even for younger workers. I don't remember the numbers on top of my head, but they are in our reports, and we can see that the benefits for those population are a bit bigger than for, I would say, normal worker, normally integrated in the economy.
Okay, looking at the time, I think we have to wrap up here. But thank you all so much. I know that there are still a couple of questions that we didn't manage to get to in this panel, but I think we have a very exciting visualization of the conference just coming up. And then I'm sure there will be a bit of time after we close the event to catch up with the panelists and still ask your questions. So thank you so much to all the panelists. Thank you for all the questions, for the very active engagement. And then let's have a look at these visualizations. Thank you.